I am very, very happy to welcome everybody to our inaugural Data Security Talk. The podcast keeps you up to date with trends and approaches to business data security. I am Bill Falk, your host, and I'm proud to be here with Actifile's co-founder and CEO, Guy Bavly. Today we're going to talk about legacy cybersecurity systems, what they do well, and perhaps what they don't do well. And we'll wrap up by talking about the latest in data security platforms. Welcome, Guy.
Thank you, Bill. I'm super excited to be here in our first inaugural session, and I'm looking forward to chat with you on the topics of today's episode.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
Sure.
So maybe a good place to start is with your own definition of legacy cybersecurity systems. What does that mean?
Well, but if you think about it, we've been doing security for in different, for modes and fashions for over 25 years now. And the world has evolved. The devices, the internet, the connectivity, the way people work, right? More from home or from anywhere on the road. And so has security been evolving. And in terms of data security, the world was planned, or the world of data security was planned for a different setup. And we're actually at Actifile experts on that, legacy setup because we were part of the, initial thinkers and the first, movers in the market, delivering the first products in what the industry later on coined as DLP about 20 plus years ago. So the world was completely different. There were local area networks. People were sitting, next to a desktop. People were hardly working from home. The data volumes were much smaller than they are today. The proliferation of available shadow IT applications were completely different, and the systems were designed for that setup exactly. You put a legacy host on the to filter the network traffic. You put something on the email server to scan the email traffic, and that's it. So that's one part of it, and that's what the legacy the data security systems were planned to. The second part was that the pressure from privacy regulation and the more evolved security frameworks was not catering to what the small and medium enterprises were looking for, and where there was no pressure or involvement on that side. So as those two trends have been, growing and evolving, and put on that the world of insurance, cyber insurance, all of that created a kind of perfect storm, so to speak, that made all of those legacy products of 20 years ago not relevant anymore.
So it's safe to say that the computing environment and other circumstances have required technologists to evolve alongside of that.
Exactly.
And and with that, what do you have like? Are there specific shortcomings that you can point to with the legacy
Yes,
systems?
yeah, sure, absolutely. So first of all, the complexity. Um, those systems were built and designed for big teams of security experts. They required a heavy knowledge and training and a lot of ongoing maintenance. Second of all, they were not planned for the cloud at all. They required, a server, management server deployment on premise, and they were not built to the world of data flowing everywhere. Every user working everywhere, taking the data with him, and really tracking and monitoring and eventually protecting it is much more difficult than before. That's another shortcoming. And of course, the evolution of the privacy regulations and framework. Now there are so many of them, and one on top of the other. There are states and federal and global and so on, making it even harder and more difficult to maintain, compliance and security in light of all of those frameworks. So all of those, I would say, progressions in the requirements really demanded a new type of technology, a new type of concept even, that Actifile was and still is a leader in the thinking on how to reinvent this and make it, accessible, democratize it, making it accessible to every MSP and MSSP serving much smaller enterprises than, what from the ones that used to be enjoying those types of solutions.
So you trigger a thought there. So is it safe to say, or maybe you could comment on the legacy systems being more built for the enterprise, and now with the focus of bringing data security into the smaller companies, what's your perspective on the evolution of the technology in order to fit into that market segment?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, it's the level of expertise. Enterprises can, afford hiring and retaining experts that could have worked with much more sophisticated yet complex to manage systems. They can, they still can buy the best of breed of each and every component, like discovery, classification, data flow monitoring, encryption, leakage prevention, and stitch them together into an end-to-end platform, like a best of breed, while not enjoying an end-to-end solution. It required a project, implementation project. So if you wanted to be compliant and secure your data, usually it took months to establish the rule set, to make sure it's aligned with every department requirements, and so on. Something that not even can be even dreamed on by smaller organization. So all of those shortcomings are being nicely resolved by Actifile, and we can speak further on how we do it in a completely different way.
So one of the pieces of the technology that's been around for a long time is encryption. How has encryption evolved?
Yeah. So encryption has been with us for a long time. Standard encryption mechanisms like based on AES 256, and it's now part of every operating system like Windows or Mac OS, where you have cryptography libraries that can serve as means to encrypt. So the encryption itself, as standard as a technology is nothing new. The challenge with encryption is doing it efficiently, and it's a great example on how Actifile thinks differently. So you can for sure go file by file, folder by folder, and encrypt files. Of course, this is really relevant for today. Tomorrow morning, and that's the world of data, everything will change. New files will be created, downloaded, copied, and so on. So you need to do another round of let's find out what's need to be encrypted and encrypted, manually. So the real challenge is to manage encryption. Now, the right way to manage encryption is based on risk. So aggregate, files according to common content. Let's say credit cards or medical records or passport numbers and so on. And once the risk of that aggregated, group, the classification is high enough for you to consider encryption, press a button and all of those files will be encrypted, which is only part of the problem, okay? Because now everything is automated, it's preemptive, every new file that will be created will be encrypted, but that's part of the problem. You don't want to change the way end users work and really ask them to remember a user and a password for those files, or wait for any type of latency for opening the files, right? They want snap reactions from their systems. So the end user experience has to be smooth enough And for them, there shouldn't be any change of the way they work. And this is exactly what Actifile provides. The ability for users to really continue working as they were, open those files, while making sure if those files are being exfiltrated in a negligent way or stolen potentially by ransomware stealing data, nobody can open those files outside the organization. So we took the technology of the encryption, which has been with us for a long time, and added on top of that automated, streamlined mechanisms that makes the encryption easy to manage and non-intrusive to the end users at the end of the day that want to continue as they were before, activating encryption.
Very good. Thank you. So it's clear that over the last couple decades, more and more data has moved to the cloud, and that continues today. What is your view of that reality in this context? Is it enough to have your data move to the cloud to improve your security posture?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think many MSPs and MSSPs and their customers believe that if they move their data to the cloud, they're protected, they're exempt, and there's no need to worry anymore. Well, it really depends on where you put the data. If the data is behind applications, okay, you're using a medical records, application, you're using a CRM or ERP, and you're hosting and you're taking your data to that application to the cloud, then you have shared responsibility between you as the data owner and the application itself to control the data. And every customer that we do a data discovery and classification for, having those applications, it doesn't stop over there, because they will have file repositories like Office 365 or Google Workspaces. The files that are created and extracted from those systems will be also on endpoints and potentially on legacy file servers on premise or network attached storage. So there is a lot of files with sensitive data outside those applications, because people did need them in the form of files and not as data being saved behind those applications on the cloud. Once you start doing discovery and classifications across the organization, across on-prem and cloud file repositories, you find out that there's a lot of data, many times forgotten or misplaced, and there is a lot of flow of data from your organization, not to your organizational file repositories, but to non-sanctioned, what the industry calls shadow IT file repositories, where you don't have any insight and no clue on what's going on over there. Actifile can provide you that insight and even can protect those files if and when they're going to be uploaded to those shadow IT applications. So
Thank you. So in this hybrid state that we're in, and it seems to me that we continue to be in for the foreseeable future, does that create more complexity in managing all the different places where the data is?
definitely. So if in the past an organization with typical setup, you had endpoints and you might have one file server and it was there. Now there are two additional, I would say conceptually, locations. One is your organizational file repository. Most organizations will have Office 365 with their different components, and there are different components. Files can be in SharePoint, in OneDrive, in Teams, and of course in mail repositories. The organization has, of course, endpoints and potentially still local file servers. And as I said earlier, there's a completely, I would say, out of sight blind spot, so to speak, what we call shadow IT. If your users decide to start working with Monday.com or upload files to a Gmail drive because they want to share it with external, people. They're not being malicious, but next to the corporate file repository, next to your endpoints and servers that are all potential locations for files, the files are flowing outside your organization and now being left on different file repositories that you don't have any clue that exist, and you don't have any means to protect yourself from those files being exfiltrated to those file repositories. Actifile has the means to allow the users to continue working the way they work, and even use shadow IT applications. But if they upload files to that shadow IT application, the file will be still protected, still encrypted. They can use it, their colleagues in the organization can use it, but no one else outside the organization. So it's an extra layer of protection. And eventually, encryption, we all know, is safe harbor according to any security framework or any, I would say, privacy regulations. So applying that puts you in a good place without, again, changing the way people work. You don't have to create rules to block it. You don't have to think about all the pathways and flows that you need to block and so on. Let people work. Just make sure that if they work in a potentially negligent way, they will not, unfortunately, harm the organization and put all of us in a potential risk.
Thank you. And thank you to all our listeners for today. And thank you, Guy, for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Bill. Looking forward for the next session.